So I want you to certainly continue enjoying your breakfast. I'm going to go ahead and get things started, but please continue to enjoy it. What's so nice is that everyone came in and there were handshakes and hugs and conversations taking place, which means this kind of started maybe a few minutes later, and that's okay because that is so important, and it's wonderful to see all of that happening. Again, good morning. I'm Beth Amico. I'm the Executive Director of the Peabody Area Chamber of Commerce. On behalf of myself and Matt Genzali, our Chairman of the Board, thank you all for being here and for your interest and involvement with the success of our local businesses, our nonprofits, our young future entrepreneurs and leaders, and the overall community. I'm thankful, like I said, that we can be all here together today in person this year. For those of you who may have taken part in our lattes with legislators last year via Zoom, I promise today I'm not going to be asking you to mute yourselves or put your questions in the chat. It's really nice to be here in person, though, so thank you so much for your support and for being here. I'm honored to welcome today's speakers and panelists. You can see we have it set up a little differently this year, so we're going to have a few speakers start us off, and then we're going to ask the elected officials who are here today to join us up on stage, and then welcome the wonderful Dave Olson from the Salem News, who will moderate that today. But I am honored to welcome today's speakers and panelists. If we could hold the applause until the end of this very impressive list. We have Senator Joan Lovely, U.S. Congressman Seth Moulton's office representatives Norman Abbott and Rick Jacobs, State Representative Tom Walsh, State Representative Sally Cairns, State Representative Brad Jones, City of Peabody Mayor Ted Betancourt, Danvers Town Manager Steve Bartha, and Middleton Town Administrator Andy Sheehan. Thank you all for being here. I would also like to thank the following elected officials for being here today and joining us, including Peabody Councilors at Large Tom Gould, Ryan Melville, John Turco, and Tom Rossignol, who's also the president of Peabody Main Streets, Ward 2 City Councilor Peter McGinn, and Ward 4 City Councilor Julie Daigle, along with retired Councilor at Large and current president of the Peabody Education Foundation, Dave Gravel. Thank you. Yes, please. Thank you also to former state representative and current Salem State University president, John Keenan, for being here today. Please also know how appreciative I am of my unbelievable board members. There are 16 of them here today, such a lucky chamber. We have executive board members, chairman of the board, Matt Genzali of MRG, past chair, Corey Jackson of Citizens Inn, first vice chair, Brian Vinagro of Peabody Wealth Advisors, second vice chair, Dave Olson of the Salem News, who will also, as I mentioned, be moderating our panelists later this morning, secretary Liz White of North Shore Bank. Other board members here today, Camille Bartlett of Peabody TV, Mary Bellavance of Grayvock, Joan Bunaskovich of Salem 5 Bank, Lynn Fiesel of Aflac and Fiesel Benefits, Wendy Jolly of Rousselot, Taylor Lee of Eastern Bank, Rob Lowell of the Terigian YMCA, Cindy Moore of Barry Real Estate, Dan Sensabaugh of Hurwitz, Richard and Sensabaugh LLC, Chris Ross of Institution for Savings, and Chris Ryder of the Mayor of Peabody's office, Chief of Staff. Thank you, Chris. We are thankful to have all of these dedicated professionals here today and representing our local communities and businesses. So a round of applause for all. And we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for our wonderful and generous sponsors. This morning's sponsors are, we have our premier sponsor, North Shore Bank. Our table sponsors today include the City of Peabody, Lionwa Auto Group, Mills 58, MRG Construction Management Incorporated, and Peabody Municipal Light Plant. Our corporate sponsors, Atlantic Ambulance Service, Citizens Inn, Classic Faces Day Spa, Harbor Light Community Partners, In the Game Peabody, International Protective Services, Metro Credit Union, Northeast Arc, and the YMC of Metro North Turigian Y. Our diamond level member sponsors are Boston Children's at Peabody, Capital One, Gravock, Hemisphere Development Group, Institution for Savings, Lifetime North Shore, MassPay, Mills 58, the North Shore Mall, Ruggiero Family Memorial Home, Salem 5 Bank, Sandra Network, and Spectra Networks LLC. Gotta give that list a round of applause. Woo! I would also like to welcome Mr. Ken McHugh and his students from Peabody High School's Personalized Remote Education Program's Social Studies class, and Mr. Scott Myers and his students from Peabody Veteran Memorial High School's AP Government class. And I'm proud of my daughter, Katie, that she can be here with us as part of that to experience this with her classmates. We have 25 students here today, although I think a couple of them were not able to make it. But Peabody Public Schools, along with our table and our corporate sponsors today, allowed them to be here to experience this. So thank you again, all. Peabody High School recently hosted a chamber event where PAC businesses met students from their CTE program, the Career and Technical Education Program, where discussions about future internships, community service, and employment took place. It was a huge success. We are already planning with Superintendent Dr. Josh Vidala to have a similar event at the Peabody Learning Academy at the North Shore Mall. And we look forward to another successful intro of local businesses to the students. I also want to let Kurt Bellavance and Stacy Burnson know that we're so thankful for the city for granting 11 Peabody-based businesses a one-year PAC membership this year. And we look forward to working with them and sharing the value of the chamber. So thank you all. That deserves a round of applause too. So many people here. I had to take a sip of water and take a breath. Also a big thank you. Can never forget Maria Terrace, the Chamber's Programs Director. She put so much effort and heart into these events, into our member relations, and she also is who we have to thank for those awesome programs that you have. So we invite you to please take one of those home with you today. And to Jim Palmer behind the camera there, and Josiah and the whole Peabody TV team, we're so thankful for you being here and always willing to just partner and help. The Peabody Area Chamber has been supporting and advocating for our area business community for over 90 years. We look forward to continuing the celebration of successes, assisting with the navigation through challenges, and supporting how we can. Now, enough of me up here. I didn't see you yet. I'm going to have the first speaker come up. I'd love to introduce Kevin Tierney, CEO of North Shore Bank, the premier sponsor of today's event. The Chamber can always count on Kevin. You can come on up here, whichever way is probably easiest, Kevin. Kevin, Liz, Chris Pesci, and the whole North Shore Bank team for their support. Kevin Tierney.
Thank you, Beth, and good morning, everyone, and happy Mardi Gras. Of course, it's North Shore Bank's pleasure to sponsor this legislative breakfast once again. We've been doing it for quite some time, and it's something that we hope to be able to continue doing. I'd like to thank the Peabody Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event and for everything they do for the city of Peabody throughout the year as a business collaborative. And thanks to each of you as engaged members. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank our elected officials who are here with us this morning to discuss some of the challenges and opportunities that are facing the business community today. Our bank is proud to partner with the city of Peabody on important initiatives such as education, affordable housing, and revitalizing the downtown district. Initiatives that have made the city a great place in which to live, work, and do business. As I look around the room, I see many faces who represent organizations with which North Shore Bank is very familiar, both commercial and personal banking customers who have been partners with North Shore Bank for a very long time. In addition, there are many organizations with us today that have been the backbone of support for the areas less fortunate, especially during these trying times of the last 2 years. They have shown strength and resilience. North Shore Bank applauds their efforts and is proud to support and partner with them. We are equally proud of our employees who have donated their time and energy as volunteers on board service and lending support to these great organizations. I'd like to say big thanks to my team here from North Shore Bank and all the great work that you folks do. I'd also like to just take a moment and recognize Liz White as Board Secretary of the Peabody Chamber. Liz is going to be retiring from North Shore Bank in April. I understand you've agreed to stay on the Chamber through November, but Liz has done a terrific job for North Shore Bank, and I know she's done a great job for the Chamber, so good luck in your retirement, Liz. It seems like North Shore Bank has been providing financial services in the city of Peabody for almost 135 years, and we can assure you we will continue our long tradition of meeting the financial and philanthropic needs of the people, family, and businesses and nonprofit organizations in the city of Peabody in the future. We invite you to reach out to us anytime, whether in person or online, for assistance for whatever business, personal, or life goals that you may have. Thanks again, and congratulations to the Peabody Chamber.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you again to North Shore Bank. Yes, we're so excited that Liz decided to stay on for the year, so thank you, Liz. Our second speaker, State Senator Joan Lovely. If I could invite Senator Lovely up on stage. Senator Lovely represents the 2nd Essex District, inclusive of the cities of Peabody, Beverly, and Salem, and towns of Danvers and Topsfield. Senator Lovely serves as the Senate's Assistant Majority Leader, is the chair of both the Senate and Joint Committees on Rules, in addition to holding many other committee assignments. Thank you, Senator Lovely, for being here today.
Good morning, and thank you, Beth, for that kind introduction and the invitation to speak here this morning. This is just wonderful to be here together, isn't it? We came in, and as Beth had said, there were hugs and just warm welcomes, and it just feels so good. And I think we're turning the corner, turning the page. Let's hope so. But before I begin my formal remarks, I want to also acknowledge the AP U.S. government students here from Peabody Veterans Memorial High School. Really just terrific to have you here this morning. Thank you for your questions. We look forward as the panel gets going to answer those questions. These past 2 years, as we know, have been incredibly challenging across our Commonwealth, across our nation, across our globe. Our small businesses are the backbone of our communities. Many faced closures, revenue loss, workforce shortages throughout the pandemic, and I'm grateful to be working alongside local, state, and federal partners to invest in the recovery of our communities. I want to give a shout out to the delegation that I have the honor of working with in the legislature, very close delegation that we all work very closely together, also with our local elected officials here in Peabody and across the second Essex. We work so hard every single day. And a shout out to our teams, the people that we get to stand on their shoulders, our staff and everyone that we get to work with. My chief, Johanna, is here this morning. Really couldn't operate without these amazing people to really support us, so I want to say thank you to them. As we move into the last 5 months of our formal session in the State House, I am acutely aware of all we have accomplished so far and how much more we have to do, how much further we have to go. The legislature has had a very busy year this session. We passed climate change legislation in 2021 to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, advance the green energy sector, and prioritize and protect the environmental justice communities. In addition, we recently passed a voting reform bill that is now in a conference committee to expand voting access permanently on codifying vote by mail and early voting options that we used during the pandemic. It worked. It was kind of a pilot and it worked, so let's make it permanent and make sure that here in Massachusetts we respect and make sure that everyone has the access and right to vote. Very, very important. Last December, just a couple of months ago, the governor signed the $4 billion ARPA bill to further the Commonwealth's ongoing response to COVID. And included in that bill was $75 million in grants to support our small businesses, $500 million for unemployment trust insurance fund. We'll be talking about this morning. And $500 million for premium pay bonuses for our frontline workers. Can't thank them enough. And I was proud to secure a $4 million recovery for our ag fairs, our agricultural fairs. You wouldn't think that there was a big impact. There was a huge impact there. And Topsfield being one of the oldest in the country, we want to make sure that we continue those traditions. Also, $2.7 million we were able to get in the budget for a community college hunger pilot program. This is a bill that I filed in the legislature, in the Senate, at the behest of former President Pat Gentile at North Shore Community College, who came to me and said, my students are hungry, what are we going to do about it? What can we do about it? We were able to get that bill passed in the budget, so thank you to the House for also supporting that bill as well for our college students, so that they have food instead of but not having to choose between their studies and feeding themselves and their families. And we also included $65 million for home ownership assistance tools, including down payment assistance and mortgage interest subsidy supports. We know housing is probably the biggest challenge, or one of the biggest challenges that we have right now, so we have to make sure that not only are we supporting our tenants and our landlords, but also people who want to become homeowners. That's the biggest investment that you make in your life, your nest egg, and we want more people to be able to do that. We're going to talk about transportation initiatives today, so I won't go into that. But I just know that many businesses have had to pivot during the pandemic just to survive. I want you to know that we've been here to support you, and we will continue to support you. And before I sit, I'm wearing some colors today in support of our friends in Ukraine. I was talking to the mayor on the way in, and I said, Mayor, I can't imagine that there would be tanks rolling through Peabody Square right now, and you as mayor would be helping to defend your community. And talking to my sister, who's been to Ukraine, and she said, Joni, it's just like Boston. She said, can you imagine that they were bombing Boston right now? So I did have an opportunity to speak with Seth yesterday about this, and just said, Seth, do everything you can at the federal level to help our friends in Ukraine. And I'm just asking for prayers from all of us and anything that you can do to support what's happening over in Ukraine. It's very difficult, but we can make a difference and we can help. So I look forward to being a part of the panel this morning, and I want to say thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lovely. I would now like to invite Rick Jacobs, District Director for U.S. Congressman Seth Moulton, to the stage, please. Congressman Moulton is the U.S. Representative for Massachusetts' 6th Congressional District. But prior to this role, Rick was the CEO of the Massachusetts Nonprofit Network, representing the interests of small to medium-sized nonprofit organizations in the Commonwealth. Rick, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I, for one, can't imagine Mayor Ted Betancourt defending the city of Peabody, and God help whoever those invaders are, because they don't stand a chance. Beth, thank you to the Chamber for the invitation to speak on behalf of the Congressman and the federal delegation. I'm also incredibly excited to see the high school students here. This is really fantastic and something I hope to see more and more of with other organizations as we speak. I hope if you take nothing else away, it's that amongst all the vitriol that you see in national politics, there are actually a lot of good public servants out there from both parties working together to get things done for their constituents. We're going to have a robust conversation in a second that's going to touch on a lot of local issues, but allow me to maybe touch just kind of quickly on 3 issues. I want to start with the COVID response and recovery. The federal government, in 6 pieces of unprecedented landmark legislation, has invested in over $6 trillion in the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. This includes direct aid to families, grants to local businesses and larger businesses, direct aid to state and local governments, obviously funding the discovery and creation and production and distribution of the COVID-19 vaccination, supports for our higher ed institutions, nonprofits, hospitals, emergency funding and hazard pay for first responders and people on the front lines of this pandemic, housing supports in the form of rental support, mortgage support, additional safety nets for those who are unhoused. This is a massive mobilization and response. And knock on wood, it appears that perhaps we're emerging from this. And the congressman is a man who trusts science, believes in science, thinks we should listen to the scientists. And just as we were so quick to adapt and mobilize, put on our masks, shut down our businesses and homes when needed, we need to move aggressively to reopen, safely but swiftly, because the data shows, thanks to the miracle that is the vaccine, those of us who are vaccinated and boosted, the risk to ourselves is less than that now than the common flu. And so it's time to get back to work, not just returning to normal, but imagining what a better future looks like as we tackle issues of housing, transportation, economic development. I want to touch briefly on two other issues that I'm fairly certain aren't going to come up in the panel conversation. The first is Ukraine, and so thank you, Senator, for mentioning that. This is something that is obviously near and dear to the congressman. As a Marine Corps veteran, he has had 2 trips to the Ukraine in the last couple of years, including one in the last month where he was visiting the front lines and understanding what was happening. And he came away with a conclusion that really has proved pretty prescient, which was that this was not just going to be a further incursion similar to the annexation of Crimea, that what Russia was preparing for was a full-scale invasion and takeover of the country of Ukraine. This is an attack on the sovereign, on the sovereignty of a nation that we haven't seen since World War II. And it's important, and it's scary. And it really is something that I think, unfortunately, is likely to get far worse before it gets better. It is certainly likely to get worse for the Ukrainians. We see a 40-mile convoy of tanks and troop transports making its way to Kyiv now. But we're also likely to feel the hurt here in the United States, and I think it's important for us to recognize that. We're going to see that in our fuel prices. We are already facing challenges with rising prices. We're likely to see further rising prices in fuel. We're likely to see rising prices in food. And I think we also need to recognize that the Ukraine borders many NATO nations, and the Russian troops will be a stone throw from NATO countries. The president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, has put his nation on a nuclear high alert. This is dangerous and reckless. And so there are very real scenarios where American troops, if this becomes an attack not just on Ukraine but on our NATO allies, where we could see our young men and women deployed and fighting and perhaps dying as part of this war. And so it's very serious and something the congressman continues to monitor. The last topic I just want to touch on, equally serious but perhaps a bit more celebratory, is the work we've been doing on a piece of legislation called the 988 legislation. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this. We've worked hard on mental health issues. This stems from the congressman's really realization and grappling with his own PTSD after his military service and the recognition of the increasing challenges we have related to mental health, especially exacerbated as part of this pandemic. But when you wake up in the middle of the night and your house is on fire, you know immediately who to call. If you wake up in the middle of the night and you're feeling suicidal or you're having a panic attack, you shouldn't have to get on your phone or open a phone book to find the crisis hotline or to understand who to call to work through that crisis. And so we passed legislation in the last Congress that will make 988 the federal number across the country to call if you are having a mental health crisis, if you're feeling suicidal. And we are proud to be working with the Baker administration to implement that in Massachusetts and to push to ensure that this is rolled out swiftly across the entire country. It should be up and running nationally by July. Whether we make that exact timeline or not is still unclear. But when it is done, this will be a service that will save thousands upon thousands of lives, and we're very proud to continue to work on that. Thank you so much for your time. I know we're going to talk a lot more about local issues, housing, transportation, et cetera, and I look forward to that. And thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Amazing. Next, last but certainly not least, please help me welcome the City of Peabody's Mayor, Ted Betancourt. Mayor Betancourt is serving his 6th term as mayor. He led and continues to lead the revitalization of downtown. If you have not watched on Facebook or YouTube yet, just the wonderful things that are happening downtown, please make sure you take the time to do that. But he's investing millions of grant funds to create a more attractive destination for people, culture, and commerce, and little ones are part of that people too. So thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Well, good morning. I'm extremely happy to be here today to see so many friendly faces, people who I haven't seen in a while, and to have our high school students here is terrific. I've been very fortunate. I know many of them that are here today, seen them grow up, and they're terrific young men and women. It's great to have our high school students here today. Before I make some comments, I did want to recognize, thank, and congratulate all of you, our business owners, employees here that work in our city, in our region. I know it hasn't been an easy stretch for all of you. I wanted to thank you and recognize your strength and resilience during these last couple of years as you continue to provide the important services to your clients, to your customers, and thankfully we have all of you here doing that work. Sure, like me, it hasn't been very easy being an elected official the last couple of years. Like you, we've probably had some sleepless nights, but for the first time in a long time, I'm feeling very optimistic about things. And it's difficult to say that considering what's going on in the world, and it was eloquently put by Rick and Senator Lovely. But in terms of some local issues, for the first time, we're feeling pretty optimistic about things, and really excited about the future in so many ways. I figured I'd talk a little bit today about our downtown. It's a topic I certainly like to speak about, and very excited about some of the recent activity and investments that we're making as a community. I just wanted to touch on those kind of briefly. The first is 2 Washington Street. Many of you know the building as the O'Shea Mansion. It's right at the entry point to Salem, entry point into Peabody from Salem. And it's 2 Washington Street, 12 Washington Street, 16 Washington Street. It's really that whole corner. For decades now, or at least over a decade, the building has been falling apart, run down. It's a beautiful building inside. The architecture, it's really amazing. Unless you have seen it, it's really hard to describe. But we've been searching for a number of years now to try to find the right type of project, and it's been years in the making. But I'm so happy to say, as of a couple of months ago, we sold that property to local developer Ed Greeley, who has just an amazing plan over in that area. I know there's a table here of employees over at Mills 58 that are working over at 2 Washington Street. Ed Greeley is the gentleman that led the development over at the Mills 58, which prior to what is there now was kind of a rundown older building that had really struggled. And he's brought that back to life, and he's going to be doing the same thing over at 2 Washington Street. It's going to be the Bell Inn and Tavern. It's going to be a restaurant on the first floor. Up above it will be a kind of a bed and breakfast inn. And then down below, it's going to be a speakeasy pub. And knowing some of the people in this room, I imagine some of you will be in that speakeasy pub. But very excited about that. That's really going to strengthen our corner of our main street. And it was a unanimous vote by the council. The council has been working very hard with me. Community Development Office, Kurt Bellavere, Stacy Burnson are here. And that's been a priority for us for a number of years. And it's coming to fruition. It's going to take some time for the construction, but we're all going to be very proud of that. And it's really going to stabilize and build up and improve our corner of that Main Street area. The second project, it was last Thursday, and I've been still kind of basking in the glow of it. We had our approval from the City Council, and I want to thank them. A number of City Councilors are here today for approval of a children's museum here in the city of Peabody. It's a little bit of a risk. It's something new. This is the first children's museum in Essex County, and something I'm very excited about. We've been researching and working with a number of children's museums across the region, across really New England. And it's something that I think is going to be a great addition, a draw to the downtown, bring people to the downtown that will then go to the shops and restaurants. And we have many terrific shops and restaurants in our downtown area that are going to greatly benefit from people coming to the Children's Museum. Right before COVID hit, we had a pop-up children's museum because we felt we had to prove it to ourselves, prove it to the community that the investment is worth it. And we just had staggering numbers in terms of the success we had in the Children's Museum. I did want to recognize in particular a couple of people that have really been carrying that for us, and without their work, we wouldn't be in this position. Camille Bartlett, Martha Holden, Tim Brown, Kurt Bellavance, and our city councilors have been instrumental in making that happen. We're going to be opening right at 10 Main Street, which is the former location of TD Bank, and it's just a terrific spot, again, in the heart of our downtown, and I think the benefits that it's going to bring to our community and to our businesses and to our families is going to be wonderful. The third project that I'm actually going to the council tonight and requesting approval to sell 10 Lowell Street, which is the Brody's building. I think all of you are familiar with that area as well. And we're moving today to sell the Brody's building, which we've owned now for a few years, to Brody's, Mike Voto, a local businessman. Brody's has been a part of our downtown for 40 plus years. It's a hot spot where you can go and see people that you haven't seen in a while and have a lot of familiarity with. And he is going to be taking down that building. If approved tonight by the city council, he'll be taking down that building and building a beautiful brand new building that will have Brody's on the first floor, some office space up above. And the building is run down and needs this, and I'm very excited about the future of that. And that'll also be a very stabilizing factor for the other section of our Main Street downtown area. So I feel that these three projects, the work that's taking place at 2 Washington Street, the Children's Museum, and then this sale of 10 Lowell Street to Brody's, to have a new Brody's building, is really going to bring the next level, bring us to the next level for our downtown, and I'm very excited about that. One other quick project that's coming, and it's probably going to affect all of us. It's going to be a difficult year next year because there's going to be a great deal of construction work, but the finished product is going to be something amazing and is going to transform that whole section of the city. We have scheduled for next year. It's been approved. It's been fully funded. It is going to be on Central Street. It's a Central Street project that was approved through the state transportation improvement planning, state TIP project. $11 million we've received for this project, and will be pretty much from the entryway into Peabody off of Route 114, Wilson Square, right until Bill and Bob's, right till we get to the downtown area. We're going to be putting in new sidewalks, new crosswalks, new trees, new lighting. We're going to widen the road in certain areas. It's kind of a difficult spot in many regards in terms of safety. And it's going to completely transform that area, and it's going to make a real difference for all of us that work, commute, live near the downtown area. So I'm very excited about that. That'll take place probably starting this time next year. We're doing a lot of the planning work now, but that's been in the works now for 4 years. And again, I'm very happy to say fully funded and fully planned for that for next year. So a lot going on. I'm also very excited to answer. There's been some terrific questions that I know are coming our way. I wanted to thank the elected officials in this room. Again, it hasn't been easy like all of us, but I'm very excited about the future and optimistic. And thank all of you, and thank the Chamber. Beth and Maria are terrific. They've helped keep things together in so many ways, and I'm very appreciative and grateful for their work. So thank you, everyone, and continued best wishes.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm asking him to stay up here because you get your choice, your first pick of chair here. It's very exciting. And before I introduce everyone to come up, my apologies. I did forget one elected official, and how can you forget Light Commissioner Tom Paris? So a big round of applause to Mr. Paris. He's not looking at me. I apologize. Thank you for being here. So at this point, I would like for Dave Olson of the Salem News, invite him to the stage. I'm going to attempt to move this in just a minute, Kyle, if that sounds good, but I'm going to invite everyone up at this time as I call your name. If Rick and Senator Lovely, if I can invite you back up. But we also are going to be inviting State Representative Tom Walsh. Representative Walsh represents the 12th Essex District, consisting of Peabody's wards 1, 2, 3, 4, and precincts 1 and 3 of Ward 5. Representative Walsh is chair of the House Committee on Ethics. Thank you, Representative Walsh, for being here. State Representative Sally Cairns, if you could join us, please. Representative Cairns represents the 13th Essex District, consisting of the town of Danvers, Middleton's Precinct 2, Precinct 2 of Peabody's Ward 5, and Peabody's Ward 6. Representative Cairns serves on the following joint committees: Advanced Information Technology, the Internet and Cybersecurity, Election Laws, Financial Services, Mental Health, Substance Use and Recovery, and Transportation. Thank you, Representative Cairns, for being here. State Representative Bradley Jones, if you could join us, please. Representative Jones represents the 20th Middlesex District, consisting of North Reading, Reading's Precincts 1, 6, 7, and 8, in addition to Linfield and Middleton's Precinct 1. Representative Jones serves as the minority leader and on the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy. Thank you for being here, Representative Jones. We have Danvers Town Manager Steve Bartha. If you could join us, please. Town Manager Bartha has been guiding Danvers in his role since December of 2014. Middleton's Town Administrator Andy Sheehan. If you could join us, please. Who began his role with Middleton in December of 2015. So look at this lineup here.
Well, welcome back, everybody. It's been a while. I noticed a lot of ties in the audience. I thought the deal was, if we were going to be able to meet again, we wouldn't have to wear ties. But here we are. It feels great, by the way. Okay, so let's get right into it. We're a little bit behind, but I want to talk, the first question about, Rick mentioned there's like a $6 trillion federal investment in COVID recovery. And, I'll start with Tom. Maybe you can take this one first. Between the federal COVID aid and increased tax collection, the state seems to be fairly flush with cash right now. What's the best way for that money to be spent? What are the priorities we should be looking at?
Good morning, everybody. First, Dave, before I answer the question specifically, let me say that I cringe when I hear that the state is flush with cash. Because I think any town administrator, mayor, anybody who is in a government position will tell you that there is a longer list of projects that they would like to accomplish than there are funds to do them. Specifically for municipalities, just sidewalks and streets that need to be repaved. That list, any councilor can tell you that they have a wish list every year of the streets that they want repaved, and you get 1 or 2 out of the 10 that you submit. So in that respect, I get a little nervous. And I will give you a for instance. We have some projects that are going on our highway projects locally, and we have been successful with the sound barriers on Route 128. But there are still some things that some individuals would like, and think that there is this pot of gold that we can just expand these projects when there are so many other projects that are in the wings. So I guess the answer is, as quickly as we, through the state, can get that money to municipalities so that they can implement the projects that they have. We've done intersections in Peabody, not necessarily with the COVID money, but we will. And the other piece of that is we have to be very careful about how we spend that money in not adding positions and really putting it towards infrastructure. I look at our school buildings, our municipal buildings. The mayor can tell you, and I'll let him answer, the facilities that he has in the city that need upgrading. And it seems to me that if you are getting one-time funds, that we should be spending them in a way that best benefits everybody for long-term. What would happen if you create a bunch of new positions is this money's going to dry up. And then how do you fund those positions? So we, as part of our economic development in the first round of COVID, had $75 million in grant money for small businesses. 25 million of that is created for a program that really started with a conversation I had with Aaron Michaelwitz, who's our House Chair of Ways and Means. There are some businesses that didn't qualify for the first round of funding through ARPA. in the CARES Act. And we had an instance locally where we had a business that incorporated on July 1st of 2019, where the cutoff was June 30th of 2019. So they spent 6 months investing in their business, getting it ready to open up, yet they didn't qualify for any of the funding. So this grant program, which is just up and running through DCHD, will provide grants to some of those businesses that missed that opportunity. It's a small fund, but at least it's something. So we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to try to assist small business as much as we can, but we have to be very careful about saying that we're flush with cash.
Let's say relatively flush with cash. Relatively, great. Anyone else? What should be the priorities for this aid coming in? I think Joan has. So, yeah.
See,
Yeah,
it
we should be spending on technology. is
takes
what
three
you're saying.
legislators to turn on the mic. I couldn't agree more with Representative Walsh. You know, we do really need to be very mindful. We do have an infusion of dollars, both ARPA and our revenues are up as well, well ahead of benchmark. That's the good news. So some of these one-time projects that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise, I think we concentrate on, and the mayor spoke to 3 really great projects, and then the Central Street improvements. Can't wait to see that as well. I'm particularly concerned about mental health, particularly for our students. Our students have just gone 2 years of very difficult learning experiences, and we're going to see a lot of catch up, but we're also hearing that a lot of students that are experiencing mental health issues. The Senate did a mental health bill late last fall. The House is doing one as well. Look forward to being able to put a really good bill together to really support our students going forward. I think that's going to be really important because we're already seeing, you know, even more ED boarding. We have the beds. We don't have the medical personnel now. So we saw a lot of people leave the workforce in the medical community, so we need to support that medical community and get it back on par so that we can support especially our youth.
Andrew or Steve, I think the challenges or the priorities in the towns might be different than maybe in Peabody. Where do you both see the money best being spent in Danvers and in Middleton?
We did paper, rock, scissors, and I lost, so I'm going to answer this. I mean, I would also echo what Rep. Walsh said. I think we're also very mindful of one-time funds versus ongoing revenue. We have to be careful. And there's a real opportunity, I think, to catch up on a lot of the infrastructure needs that we have. As a region, a lot of our infrastructure is a century older than other parts of the country, and it was in a lot of places where development happened later had built-in mechanisms, impact fees, tolls to pay for the maintenance of those. So we're all facing crumbling infrastructure that we struggle to keep up with. And we share an interest, you know, Danvers and Middleton operate a water system together, so water infrastructure, we've been working with the delegation on water resiliency on the North Shore. I think there are opportunities there, as well as, you know, roads and I think transportation is another area where there are a lot of great ideas bouncing around the North Shore for how to make those sort of last mile and even smaller connections. Our pots of money are a lot smaller than the state, so we are, I think, generally more risk averse as individual municipalities, but I think there's an opportunity to fund some interesting ideas that if work could be expanded or tried elsewhere. So water infrastructure, transportation, roads, kind of the bread and butter, because the rep is absolutely right. We have far more capital needs each year than we can fund out of our local resources. This is a chance to catch up and get creative, I think.
Yeah, if I could, I think the other thing to keep in mind, and I think, you know, Steve and I operate at the local level in smaller communities, so we're maybe more mindful of it, or maybe it's a little bit more front of mind for us. And I know the governor is planning to put some of this surplus into reserves, into the rainy day fund. Those are things that in Middleton we've been doing for a number of years, and it's served us well. both in terms of our ability to borrow and borrow at a good rate, but also as a cushion against the inevitable next downturn. And while we've all got, we've got tens of millions of dollars worth of one-time projects that we could do, we know that is, the same situation exists for every city and town in the Commonwealth, and for the Commonwealth itself. But it's also important to put money aside for the future, whether it's into stabilization or into, I know we'll be talking about the Unemployment Trust Fund in a little while. It's an important opportunity to put some money away for those future challenges that are going to come up.
Great, thank you. Brad, I saw you nodding your head when Steve was talking about transportation issues and things like the last mile. We're really getting the whole range.
Yeah, exactly. I can probably do all right without the microphone, but
Right.
I think one of the things Tom touched upon was, you said we were flush with money, and thinking back how, 18 months ago, none of us would think we'd be using the word flush with money in any way, shape, or form, or how we were in free fall. And because we'd had a healthy stabilization fund and in part resources from the federal government, we were able to get through FY21, into FY22. Now we're back at a point where we have the highest stabilization fund we've ever had in the Commonwealth's history. And obviously, as a former local official and a longtime member of the legislature, there is never any shortage of good ideas of where to spend those resources, and we're going to try to address, obviously, a lot of those. I do think that there is an opportunity to provide some targeted tax relief, and I think we've seen the governor file a proposal. I don't think it'll be, passed certainly exactly as proposed, because that's the way the legislature works. We can't do exactly what the Senate proposes, and the Senate can't do exactly what the House proposes, and none of us can do what the governor proposes. But that being said, I think, generally speaking, we've worked pretty collaboratively to get things done, and having to make some very difficult decisions certainly during the pandemic. But I think the governor has proposed some tax relief ideas on the estate tax, expanding the senior circuit breaker, raising no tax status, that's targeted to different segments, and I think it's appropriate for that to be part of the discussion. I think some of what the panel has talked about doing things that are sustainable, whether they're infrastructure, but infrastructure that then in turn relates to sort of the ongoing costs. So if you build a new building, you're going to have life cycle costs that you have to do in terms of maintaining it and operating it, and making sure that's part of the discussion. So there's a tremendous level of opportunity, but I'm far happier where we stand today than where we thought we would be standing today just 2 years ago, and that's in part due to the work of the legislature, the business community, and still finding a way to work and keep your doors open and be creative, and I think change the dynamic in the dialogue about how our economy is going to look going forward. Senator Lovely talked about mental health. One of the things that the pandemic exposed in a far quicker and greater way was telehealth. And how that's going to be a permanent part of our landscape and medical provision of medical services going forward than maybe it was ever envisioned to be. So there's a number of those opportunities. I'm sure some of you are dealing with businesses about employees that maybe started to get used to working from home, and how that's going to become maybe a permanent part of the landscape, and how you work with employees, and are they in 5 days a week, or are they in 3 days a week, and how that all works out. So the pandemic has been a tremendous burden on all of us in any way, shape, or form. I think it's raised a lot of serious questions that we can all learn from and take advantage of as we come out of it. But fortunately, I think financially we're in a far better situation on March 1st of 2022 than any of us thought we would be when we were having Ways and Means hearings in June of 2020. So that's a positive.
Great. Thank you. So this is one from some of the business owners in the chamber. What's the best way to fix the state's unemployment trust fund so small businesses aren't forced to pay increasingly higher premiums even as the state approaches full employment? Who would like to jump up and take that one? Nobody. Yeah. I knew Sally would take a stab.
Good morning. You'd think I'd know better by now to not take the hardest, most politically unpopular question, but
I spoke last time.
yeah. So tough acts to follow, great people to work with. And if, I just wanted to say that if unprecedented and are you on mute were the watchwords of the early pandemic, collaboration is now the mantra of everybody. And I don't have to tell all of you chamber members that. The collaboration in this room with our communities, with our schools, businesses, large and small, is extraordinary. So I just wanted to put that out there. A word on infrastructure. Completely agree with my colleagues at the municipal level. Steve and Andy and I have conversations a lot, not together, so be interesting to see what you two are swapping notes on over there. And that's very important. And the ARPA money and the bipartisan infrastructure law will be big opportunities. I don't dispute what my good friends here say about being careful and watchful. That $4.6 billion investment in our rainy day fund is very important. There's another piece of infrastructure that I don't want us to overlook, and I do appreciate the need to deal with our water pipes, water and sewer. It's not sexy, it's not a whole lot of fun, but it is vital. And the other part is our human infrastructure and childcare. All of you have employees who need childcare. You can't get to work and concentrate on your work when you're thinking, how am I gonna get the kids? I'm looking at Eric Mitchell, my constituent in Danvers, who is the leader at Pathways for Children. And these are the types of programs that we depend upon and must strengthen. So I just wanted to give a word on that. On the UI fund, we made a $500 million investment in that fund with our share of the ARPA funds that we combined with our own revenues. And so that's very important. The rates have been frozen for, I want to say, 5 or 6 of the last 8 or 10 years. And there is a commission hard at work on figuring out the very long-term piece of that. I will say that back to the collaboration, one of the first things I did, the first thing I did when I got appointed to the Committee on Advanced IT and Cybersecurity was I got on the phone to Dave Gravel and said, hey, can we have coffee? And he gave me a great tutorial. And then on the UI, when we had a bit of a mix-up and we had to fix it, and we did fix it, Herb Harris was on the phone to me right away saying, you gotta fix this. So collaboration is the watchword, and we're listening, we hear you. So that's what I've got on that one.
So Governor Baker, I think, has asked for a federal waiver to relieve. Is that, Rick, is that from your perspective, is that something that is a realistic hope that we could get some sort of federal waivers for some of these quote-unquote overpayments that have gone to some of our citizens? It's uncanny.
Check. There we go. I'm a terrible liar, which is an occupational hazard for sure. So the short answer is I don't know. I mean, it's certainly something we'll look at. I think all options are on the table. I think we need to do is take we have not, the federal government has not been afraid over the last couple of years to invest where needed to ensure that our individuals and our businesses and our families and our communities emerge from this pandemic stronger. And so I think looking at something like that is absolutely on the table.
Yeah, we should mention, we do have one more elected official in the building. My traditionally late arriving former neighbor, State Senator Bruce Tarr. You do have the option of joining us for the last few questions, if you like.
I'm waiting to see if there'll be any more unemployment questions before I come up.
See, that's how Bruce got where he is. He shows up at the end and misses all the tough questions. So let's stick. Maybe we'll stick with starting with you, Rick. Peabody has long been outside the state and federal really transportation system. It's for a city its size, it's very isolated in terms of public transportation. And I know public transportation, especially trains, but has been a focus of the congressman. What can we do to bring Peabody into the fold that way with the rest of the Essex County?
It's a great question, and I didn't get a chance. I should have in my introductory remarks to plug the bipartisan infrastructure law. This is $1 trillion going direct to states and municipalities to invest in much-needed infrastructure improvements. That specifically will result in $9 billion here in Massachusetts. So that's improvements of roads, that's improvements in mass transit, that's addressing wastewater and sewer infrastructure, broadband, a whole litany of issues that are necessary and really long overdue. I think going back to a couple of my previous themes, I think it's also, yes, we have a major backlog in these areas, but I think we also have to think about what should be different coming out of this pandemic, and what will our lives look like 20 or 30 years from now, and how are we preparing for and investing in that. And if you look at our transportation infrastructure, it was designed almost exclusively to get people in and out of Boston. And very little is done to connect communities or to provide for ease of transportation within communities themselves. And so if you don't have a major train station, if you don't have a major bus line, you can be something of a mass transit desert, so to speak. You have to own a car. And the last mile transit is very challenging, but I think there's a bunch of different ways we can collectively and regionally tackle this. One is exactly what I said, is in a regional approach. I mean, how do we look at ways to connect downtown Salem to downtown Peabody, to the mall, to Centennial, to Mill 58? Is there a regional transit that can connect those people? How do we look at expansion of things like the pilot program? The congressman visited the pilot program in Salem for the Skipper, which is kind of a hybrid, almost ride-hailing, ride-share service, but run through public transit. How are we investing in mobility like bicycles and others, investing in bicycle lanes? How are we how are we expanding things like the shuttle service to the airport? And we may not be able to eliminate car transportation. I don't know that that's the goal, but if we can make it feasible that a family could reduce one car and still get around, still get to the grocery store, still shop, still get to their jobs, still get to the adjoining community, then I think we're starting to make a difference in in how people look at mobility. And I think the other is a psychological change. We assume sort of transportation on our roads is somehow free. We pay for the subway, we pay for buses, we pay for commuter rail, but somehow road transportation is free, and that's just not the case. We pay a significant amount of money for our road infrastructure, and we should look at making it a more equitable investment in other transit opportunities, and trying to make those transit opportunities not just a good alternative not just an alternative for a do-gooder who wants to, be friendly to the environment, but as a desirable alternative to jumping into our cars and getting places.
Yeah, Tom Pettis.
This is one of my favorite subjects. All of us on this stage have worked trying to get what we call the trolley from downtown Peabody to the Salem station. There is a spur that runs between Dunkin' Donuts and what was Century Bank, and it runs right over through Salem, right over to the Salem station. It's about 1.5 to 2 mile spur. We were successful a few years ago in the legislature of getting funding to conduct a study to see what the feasibility of operating a trolley would be. I think, Mayor, you would agree that we're a little bit shocked at the price, but that was the suggestion of a diesel engine And there are alternatives, and when you talk with professionals in the transportation industry, I think we could do this for far less money if we can get agreement among the different parties, which would be the railroad themselves, the MBTA, the city, how we're going to operate it. But you could essentially run, if you embedded the tracks, much like as that train twice a week comes through Peabody Square, the tracks are embedded and you drive right over them through the intersection. If you go to many cities across the nation, the tracks are embedded and the trolley or their bus will run right along with the traffic. We could do that with this spur for significantly less money than what was proposed. I think at the time it was 35 million was the suggestion. I think you could do it for a lot less money. As far as additional transportation, we were successful again as a group getting Logan Express back to Peabody. It's operating from the North Shore Mall. If you go by, I am ecstatic when I drive by there and see how many people are using this. And it's not only people who are traveling. Now, this past week, obviously, if you had children and you were traveling for school vacation, and you could see because the parking lot had a lot of cars that were still covered with snow, so good for them. I'm a little jealous. But what it showed me was not only is it people who are using the Logan Express lot for travel, but it's also employees of the airport who are no longer driving down Route 1 or through the communities on their way to the airport, whether it's Revere, East Boston, getting over there. It's an essential service. It's just a small piece of that transportation network. So it's incrementally getting to a place where there are options for not only our travelers, but our residents and our workers. So, and really, I cannot stress enough how no one person can do this. This is really a collaborative effort among the people who are sitting on the stage, and really so many of you who are part of the business community and working to make everything work a little bit more effectively across the city.
Thank you. Okay, now we have, we're going to have some questions from, oh, someone raised their hand. Joan, I'm sorry, Joan, I did not mean to interrupt you.
Okay, got it. If I could just quickly just add just a couple of thoughts about transportation. Just yesterday in Salem, myself, Mayor Driscoll, Rep. Tucker, and Congressman Moulton took a ride on the Salem Skipper. So that is a Salem transportation option. It's a van. It's $2. It'll pick you up near your house, in front of your house, and take you anywhere you want to go in Salem. It's a great solution for some of the short-term travel, again, just to get people moving around within the community, and we should look at expanding it in other communities like Peabody. And so Beverly has CATA, Cape Ann Transit Authority, which originates out of Gloucester, and it has just expanded into different neighborhoods, including Apple Village, which, as you know, is tucked up off of 128 behind cell signaling. And that's a lower income community that just has no access to public transportation. So again, these are these public transportation options that we can get into little pockets of the community to move people around and do that. So, because we know transportation is regional. And so to be able to do that here in Peabody as well and really move people. Also, the delegation met just last week about electrifying the rail and really making those plans and putting that in place. Long-term project, but something we have to get to. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to take some questions from our high school students, and I'll turn it over to Maria.
Okay, so hi, I'm Taryn. I'm 18. I do AP Gov. Mr. Myers, he's the best. Anyways, so I know your guys' jobs are super stressful. All of it is really stressful. So what has been a recent accomplishment of you guys that has made the stress of politics worth it?
Go ahead, Ted.
Thank you, Taryn. I have heard you yell, so I know you can yell. So it has been. It's been a very stressful time, very difficult moments. There's nothing worse than seeing somebody in pain, and you're trying to help them, and sometimes you can. Other times it's difficult to do so. And but it also, the last couple of years, has been very rewarding on many levels as well. We've been able to help a number of people and try to help move things along and as best we can help people. There's on a personal level, there's been a few things that I've been a part of that I've been extremely proud of. We invested significant money as a city and from state and federal funds in order to improve our downtown flooding. We were always an example whenever there was a major rain event. We were always on the news, downtown Peabody, and I always felt that that was something we needed to correct to try to entice businesses and investment in our downtown. We've been able to do that over the last few years. I will not say that our troubles are over, but we're definitely in a much better situation to be able to handle large storms, and by building upstream retention ponds and things like that, we've been able to do much better. Personal level, the rehabilitation of Crystal Lake was a big thing that I enjoyed being a part of. But really the best thing that I feel like the city has done, the best investment recently, has been with the Higgins Middle School. I think all of our students were able to go to the Higgins Middle School. My hope is that, and it won't help you certainly, but I really want to make a new Peabody High School happen. And I'm looking forward to doing that and pursuing that as a community. And also we need to look at a public safety building as well. So a couple of things that I'm very proud of, but there's a lot of work to be done. And now that the state is flush with cash, maybe we can make that happen.
Yeah, well, you know. Anyone else? Steve, Andy?
Okay, I think I got it. I think something in Danvers, it has been an upside down 2 years. You layer COVID with social unrest and racial unrest and all of the things going on. But we opened a new elementary school last fall, and in the midst of all the crazy, it was really nice to see a whole bunch of little kids, even though they were masked, sort of entering this new space, and their eyes light up because they remembered their old school and now they're seeing their new school. And so we deal with a lot of heavy, ugly stuff from day to day, but it's nice to be reminded once in a while that these little people were super excited just to see the shiny new spaces that they were going to get to navigate. So there are some sort of shining moments sprinkled in there.
Thank you. Sally, you had the unemployment question, so you get to.
Thank you. I'm going to mention one thing because we have young people here, and I was talking with a couple of fellows, they're right over there, and to give you a flavor of what the day-to-day work of a legislator is. And we had a case in my office, and Catherine McGee, my awesome aide, is right here at this table next to Andrew Arnodis, the awesome aide to Tom Walsh. If there are others, Norman Abbott, I see you, and Joe Wakeland from the Senator's office. And they all work together. They're in contact, even though we were remote. We had a case in my office of a young man, 24 years old, and Tim will appreciate this because it was a young man with a, I would say a mild cognitive issue, and he was in a wheelchair. And he was living in a nursing home. And we went to work on this, and we knocked on every agency door, and finally, because of COVID, and because I'd met the Secretary of Human Services at the COVID vaccination site in Danvers, and she said, here, take my cell, never thinking I would call her at 4 o'clock one day and say, please, you have to help this young man. And over a month's time, it took a month. The wheels of government do not go rapidly, and I don't think even $9 billion is going to improve that situation. But we kept at it, and Catherine kept at it. We both kept at it, and that young man was moved to a group home in Beverly in a situation that was so much more appropriate. That's the kind of case, and I said to Catherine, that'll keep you going for a few months when you can achieve something like that. So that's just to give you all a sense of the personal gratification that you get when you crack a tough one.
Go ahead, Brad.
Well, I was going to touch on exactly what Sally said, that much of the past 2 years isn't necessarily, let's say, project-based, but it's been individual-based about the literally what in more normal times might have been dozens of constituent cases, but in these times were literally hundreds of constituent cases. And some unusual ones, Probably the most recent one we had was we had somebody who'd lost their license in Massachusetts because of something that happened in Colorado. It turns out it wasn't them, but they needed to get a letter from Colorado. It was going to take a lot of time. So I just emailed the minority leader in Colorado and said, you don't know me from Adam, you don't owe me anything, isn't that? And it was done in a day. And that person is able to keep his license, keep his job, and go back to work. Is that a big thing? In that person's life, it's a big thing. And I think for I think all of us, particularly in the legislature, but I'm sure even in City Hall and Town Hall, people that have come through the door, particularly during the pandemic, in need, maybe in fear of losing their house or losing services, and working in those cases, are probably the most gratifying thing. Certainly lost a lot of sleep. The amount of emails and calls we were getting was overwhelming. We had days in my office where we were getting 1,200 emails and trying to sift through and triage, what's really, really important that needs to be done today, which is, as opposed to maybe somebody who's just expressing an opinion on a piece of legislation, which, albeit important, isn't necessarily as important as somebody who's maybe trying to figure out, what do I do for health care? What do I do for medical care? What do I do for unemployment, tax issue, a child support issue, groceries, whatever the case may be. So in the past 2 years, it's been the tremendous number working with our staff, and I started out as a staffer before I got elected, knowing how hard it was. And for our staff who wasn't set up to be able to work necessarily as easily outside the office. They were better off now. They've been given laptops and things like that. Sort of 18 months into it, they could have used it 18 months ago. But how many of them worked long hours, weekends, nights, for a lot of not appreciation? We're happy the State House is open again. It is a little frustrating for some people in the public who portray it as, since we were not open to the public, that somehow we weren't working. Which is so far from the truth, it's not really even funny.
Okay, we have 2 more questions, I think, from the crowd.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nikayla Tales. I'm a student from Peabody Prep, remote learning school. I would like to thank Dr. Lord, the director of Peabody Prep, Mr. McHugh, my teacher, and the mayor of Peabody for this great opportunity. So you all addressed my question already, but I wanted to start with an experience that I had last year with my friend when we tried to go to Boston, but because there was no public transportation methods in Peabody, we had to go to Salem and get a train from there. And in addition, and bringing up the same idea, next year I plan to go to college in Boston. So like original transportation would be really helpful for me. So I wanted to ask, like, if you guys have any plans that maybe I'm not aware of, to connect all of Peabody to the original transportation network.
Bruce?
Tom?
Well,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
See, I got him, I hooked him, there we go.
Wow.
Hurry up, Tom.
Okay, you got me off the bench. First of all, good morning. It's great to be here with all of you. Great to be here with all of my colleagues who do a remarkable job of working together, crossing both chambers, crossing party lines, and ensuring that we always work in a collaborative way to benefit the people that we represent. I did want to take a moment, since you gave me a brief segue here, I did want to say just a word of thanks to Rick Jakius and Congressman Moulton. Because one of the reasons we can talk about the fact that we have so much opportunity is because the Congress worked to provide us with federal resources that we'll now be able to determine how to best spend. And we couldn't do that if we didn't have great federal colleagues that were working with us. And I think that needs to be said, and I'm happy to be here to say it. I would point out that one of the great challenges that we have on the North Shore is that level of interconnectedness that you described. And Rick made a very good point earlier that our system has historically been designed to be able to bring people into Boston and bring people out of Boston, but we haven't thought about the enormous possibilities that we can have from regional interconnections. And I know that there are a lot of folks in the business community that are thinking about that. One thing that's been very important that's happening regionally is something called the North Shore Blue Economy Initiative, which is looking at the coastal resources and the coastal climate for business and how we can interconnect to be able to grow that new segment of business that has always been there but has never really been supercharged to the extent that it can. So as we look at the need economically and educationally to be able to interconnect, we have to think about the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity we have to deploy the resources that are not only being generated from a state surplus, and we are on target once again to have a surplus this year in our state budget, as well as additional federal resources. And you know, again, I know that this is a phrase I am sure I will hear for the rest of the year, that we are not flush with cash. But we have the opportunity to do some things that will change the game for us on the North Shore. And that interconnection is one of them, whether it be the blue economy, whether it be in creating greater access to our academic institutions. For instance, if I'm in Gloucester and I'm trying to get to the Danvers campus of North Shore Community College, that's a very difficult thing to do with public transportation. It's easier to get to the Lynn campus, but we can think about how do we connect those. So we need to think about that, and we also need to think about it in the face of reducing carbon emissions. So if we think about how we can have more efficient, clean technology to be able to make those interconnections, to take advantage of things that we didn't have before, we can be able to make sure that not only can you make that trip into the city more reliably, but you can also go to other parts of the North Shore and be able to not only benefit from those things, but also we can have a supercharged economy as a result of it. Now, it's not going to happen overnight. Obviously, this is going to take some careful planning, and we need to be able to do that. But it is a vision that we should be focused on. Because as we think about, and somebody on the panel mentioned the next 20 or 30 years and what our lives are going to look like, it could look a lot more like we are not envisioned the way that maybe we have been in the past, as many of our communities being just bedroom communities for a Boston economy. We can think about how we are a supercharged economy to create jobs, to create learning opportunities, and sustain them locally. Thanks for a great question.
Thank you. I think we have one more question. Is that Maria?
Thank you so much. Make sure you say your name, okay?
Is it on?
It is on.
Oh, it is on. All right. I'm Sam Oliveri. I'm with Mr. Myers from Peabody High. As Taryn touched upon, he's pretty cool, but my question was with, obviously, even as a teenager, I could see the radicalization of the country, and that causes gridlock on the national level. And I was wondering for the local level politics, whether you experience this type of gridlock, and if so, to what extent?
No, we don't. Elaborate.
No, we don't. I'm pretty proud of the legislature, both the House and the Senate in Massachusetts, in the executive branch. I think there really has been a collaborative effort in my time in the legislature. We don't always agree, but, well, some people think we do, but no, we get along pretty well. And, you know, not only in the chamber itself, but there are people who are from the other side of the aisle who are my good friends. There are times when session is over, when a group of us will go out to dinner. There have been times when there have been fewer from the Democratic Party than the Republican Party, and those in the Republican Party, the minority party in Massachusetts, are gleeful when we sit at the table and there's more of them than there are of us. But, you know, I'll give you a small example of something that got done because of the collaboration of the minority leader, myself, and Representative Wong, and that's at Goodwin Circle, if you're familiar with it, which is really where Lynn, Peabody, and Linfield come together. And if you came in off of Route 1, MassDOT had created a second lane so you can bear to the right and go off to Linfield Street and Lynn very easily. Well, that wasn't the case on the Peabody side. When you come from Linfield Street and Peabody to Salem Street and Linfield, we didn't have that same situation. So working Councilor Turco, who was the ward council in Ward 1 at the time, had a constituent who was talking with him about how we needed to correct that. We were able, through a letter from the minority leader, Representative Wong, and myself, bring this to the attention of the Mass Department of Transportation. And working with them, we were able to get the same thing created on the other side. So now you don't have that backup on Linfield Street first thing in the morning when you get up to the Rotary. Small thing, but it's working together. We're not enemies. There are things we don't agree on, but I think Massachusetts has a proud history of working together.
Okay, thanks. So at the local level, you know, we tend to be a little bit less partisan. We are sort of by definition nonpartisan. So our elected officials, our select board members, don't run on a party plank or a party platform. So that, I think that benefits us. There's plenty of incivility. And I think we have to be careful to acknowledge that and not take a Pollyanna approach to it. I've been in local government for more than 30 years in one capacity or another. Things are a lot nastier now than they were when I started. In Middleton, we've been able to. There's been plenty of tension, especially in the last 2 years, but we've been able to continue to work and not get too bogged down in that. And we've been able to accomplish some things in the last couple of years that we weren't able to accomplish in the prior 30 or 40. The most notable of which was a $60 million public facilities project that got approved last year. So if we can keep reminding people that it's not just about them and the person that they're across the table from, and that if we can keep the greater goal in mind, we can make some progress. But it's certainly, and Steve may disagree, I think from my perspective, I'd rather be at the local level than at the state level, or definitely at the federal level. I think we're a little bit protected from it.
As it's making its way down, I'll echo and add on to what Andy just said. He and I belong to a professional association that specifically requires that we remain non-political. And we think about that as we're on the island of neutrality, but that island has been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking in recent years. I worked in Connecticut during and after Sandy Hook, and I remember the most interesting monthly meeting of managers I was ever part of. We were debating as a group whether we should be putting out a statement, and we ended up not, because everything now has become politicized: science, masks, vaccines, the thin blue line flag in Danvers. And so it's hard, and I think it's, to the point Andy made, we can't pretend that it's not there, but at the same time, I would agree with what else has been said, is that we still have communities to run, services to provide, schools to build. So we do work together, and I think, especially at the local level, it's disheartening to see national politics being compressed down to the local level and hearing debates and vitriol that never occurred there before that are now being pushed down to the local level. But we also have the ability to take the step forward because we have to keep providing the services so that people can go about their daily lives.
Since it's coming by, I'll weigh in. I would agree with Rep. Walsh and with our colleagues at the state level. We work really hard here in Massachusetts to be bicameral and to be bipartisan. And a shout out to the minority leader in the Senate, Senator Tarr, who we work so closely together. It's not about the idea with a D next to it and an R next to it. It's about the good idea. How do we work on those good ideas together? And we work really hard at doing that, working with our governor and working with the House. And I couldn't be more proud to be part of it.
Thank you. That's a great question, Sammy. And really, Andy and Steve said things well. When you run for city council or for mayor or for a school committee, electric light position, you don't do it as a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. It's nonpartisan. We don't put that on the ballot. We don't run as party candidates. So oftentimes, or really, I would say just about every time, when we have a city issue, it doesn't get into Republican or Democrat. They're not really party issues. They become issues of the city. We want to build a new middle school. We want to build a new high school. We want to build a new public safety building. We want to do this type of road work. So it really becomes that type of discussion about what's best for the city. And there's debate and there's some arguments at times and there's some disagreement. But really, it's not based on party politics, which is terrific. Because it is tough to see. Sometimes, when I watch CNN or Fox News, I feel like I'm in two different countries. I don't know what to believe. But that doesn't really hit the cities and towns. So it kind of takes party politics out of it and really just focuses on what's in the best interest of the city. And everybody brings a different perspective and different thoughts as to what's right for the city, but it's really not based on party politics, which is very helpful in moving things along.
You get the last word.
I'll maybe wrap it up with the federal perspective, since it seems like we're the cause of a lot of this. And I won't lie, I mean, I understand your sentiment, and I find it embarrassing that the behavior of many of my boss's colleagues. And I think it's actually, frankly, dangerous. I think our democracy is far more fragile than we might think, and there are a lot of people playing fast and loose with that democracy. And I do see it a little bit locally. I do see it in a what I would characterize as maybe an acceptance of nastiness and maybe a lack of civility and grace in the way people sometimes interact. And that began in kind of anonymous forums and chat rooms online, and then it expanded online on Twitter and Facebook, and then we see it frequently in the phone calls and emails we get to our office, and now we're increasingly seeing it show up on things like school board committees and select board meetings and board of health meetings. And so that suggests to me that it's becoming more and more normal to just not treat your neighbor and friend who you might have a difference of opinion with a level of respect and civility and grace that they deserve. And I think that's fundamentally dangerous if we don't fix it. And so the question is, how do we fix it? Robust civics education, subscribe and read your local paper, be informed, vote, serve your country, whether that's through the military or AmeriCorps or Peace Corps, run for office. We rarely talk, we're sitting up here, but there are thousands of people out there who serve on library boards and water and sewer boards and all these other volunteer positions. They're out there serving their countries and their communities, and I think taking more seriously not just our rights, but our responsibilities as citizens is critical.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Let's have a round of applause for our... And thank you all for coming. It's been a long couple of years. It's good to see everybody again. Thank you.